Imagine spending 16 years building something from nothing. Not for a corporation, not for a boss, not for a stock portfolio or a quarterly report. For your country, for your community, for the 2 million people who depend on what you built every single day. Now imagine waking up one Tuesday morning and finding out that a group of well-connected strangers in expensive suits had walked into a government office, handed over your work with their name on the cover page, and collected a $4 million contract for it. And the worst part? The system that was supposed to protect people, the system you built, started failing. Real families, real people. No benefits, no answers, no explanation. This is the story of Ethan Callum, a man who trusted the system until the system taught him something no one should ever have to learn the hard way. Sometimes, the most dangerous weapon they can use against you is your own work. Stay with me, because what happened next, nobody saw coming.
It was 6 a.m. on a Tuesday in Austin, Texas, when I woke up before my alarm for the first time in months. Not because I was excited, because I couldn't stop thinking. I lay there on my back, staring at the ceiling for a couple minutes, with that feeling, the one that sits right between your stomach and your throat. Not pain exactly, but not nothing either. Laura was still asleep next to me. The room was dark. Outside, Austin hadn't woken up yet. I got up quietly, came downstairs, made coffee, and sat down in the same chair I'd been sitting in almost every morning for the last 12 years. The kitchen table, laptop open, yellow legal pad to the right. That was my ritual. And that morning, while my coffee went cold in the mug, I opened the email from the Texas Department of Human Services and read the subject line for the 4th time since midnight. Contract renewal decision, fiscal year 2026-2027. I took a slow breath, and I opened it. Now, before I tell you what was in that email, you need to understand something about me. I'm not a Harvard engineer. I don't have an MBA. I don't have a billion-dollar partner. I don't have a network of contacts in Washington. What I have is this: a father who worked 32 years in an electronics components factory in San Antonio. A man who taught me to use the work computer on weekends because we didn't have one at home. A man who never once complained about a day of work in his life. Who came home with calloused hands and still helped my sister Carla with her math homework before dinner. My dad believed one thing above everything else: if you do the right work, the right way, the right thing happens in the end. I believed that for a long time. I started working in software systems at 23, as a contract tech at a small firm in Austin. I kept learning, kept growing, took night courses after full shifts, saved money for 4 years to start my own company. Callum Systems LLC. A 12-square-foot office I shared with an accounting firm above a sandwich shop on 6th Street. No employees. Just me, a local server, 3 monitors, and more energy than money. Then one day I got a call from the Texas Department of Human Services. They needed someone to build a benefits processing system, something that could integrate food assistance, medical coverage, and housing support into a single platform. The old system had been built in 1998. It was literally running on technology that belonged in a museum. I was 31 years old. I'd never taken on a contract that size in my life. I said yes. Over the next 16 years, the Texas Benefits Integration System, what I called the TBIS, became the backbone of social services for millions of people across the state. It wasn't just software. It was the system that decided whether a family received their food assistance on Friday or had to wait until Monday. It was the system that processed a child's medical verification before they needed to be hospitalized. It was the system a social worker in El Paso used at 11 o'clock at night to pull up a family's history when something was wrong. 2.3 million people depended on that system every single month. I knew that. I thought about it every day. I'm not being dramatic when I tell you I treated that system like it was mine to protect. Every update, every patch, every new feature, I documented everything. Not because anyone told me to, because it was the right thing to do. My sister Carla, she's an elementary school teacher in San Antonio. She used the system every week to verify her students' eligibility for the school lunch program. She never knew I built it. I never told her. It felt like bragging. But I knew. For 16 years, I renewed my contract with the state of Texas every 2 years. On time, without fail, without a single formal complaint. With performance reviews that ranged from excellent to exceptional, every single cycle. I was invisible in the best possible way. The system worked, people got their benefits, nobody called with a problem. That was success to me. Until that Tuesday morning. The email had 4 paragraphs. The first thanked me for my dedication to public service over the years. The second informed me that following a procurement process conducted between October and December 2025, the TBIS maintenance and operations contract had been awarded to a new firm. The third said the name of the firm, Langford and Draper Consulting, Washington, D.C. The fourth paragraph said my current contract would expire March 31, 2026, and that my cooperation in the transition would be required, meaning I was expected to transfer all technical knowledge of the system to their team over the next 6 weeks. I read it 3 times. Then I walked to the sink, turned on the tap, and stood there looking at the water for about 30 seconds. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the mug across the room. I just thought one thing. Wait, I never heard about any procurement process. You know what most people do when they get news like that? They call somebody. They vent. They panic. They make a bad decision out of pure emotion at 2 in the morning. I didn't do any of that. I went back to the yellow legal pad, opened to a blank page, and wrote at the top. What did I miss? Because something was off. I had kept regular contact with my contract manager at the department, a guy named Dennis. Always polite, always professional. And he had sent me an email in September, 4 months earlier, telling me the renewal cycle was on track, 4 months ago. So I went to the Texas procurement portal, the public system where every state contract is required by law to be posted before it's awarded. I searched for TBIS. I searched for Texas Benefits Integration System. I searched for benefits software procurement. Nothing. There was no record of any public solicitation for a replacement of my contract in the last 12 months. I stopped, stared at the screen, and that feeling in my chest came back, but deeper this time, heavier. This wasn't a procurement. This was something else. I called Dennis Crane at 8:30 that morning. He picked up on the 3rd ring, with the voice of someone who'd been expecting the call. Ethan, I was going to call you today. Dennis, I said. Where was the bid published? 3 seconds of silence. Ethan, this was an internal competitive evaluation process. It doesn't require public posting. A $4.2 million contract using public funds doesn't require public posting? Ethan, I understand you're frustrated. I'm not frustrated, Dennis. I'm asking a technical question. What's the legal basis for conducting a public contract selection without posting to the official procurement portal? Another pause. You'll receive all required documentation in the coming days. He hung up. I stared at the phone for about 10 seconds. Then I wrote in the yellow pad, right below, what did I miss? He didn't answer the question. Laura came downstairs at 9 o'clock. She's a nurse at a public hospital. 12-hour shifts 3 times a week. She had the day off. She took one look at my face and knew. What happened? I showed her the email. She read it again, looked up at me. 16 years, she said. Not a question, a statement. 16 years, I said back. She was quiet for a moment. Then she came and sat beside me, put her hand on my arm, and said something I didn't fully understand until much later. Ethan, you built that. That's not going anywhere. I spent the rest of the morning looking into Langford and Draper Consulting, Washington, D.C. firm, founded in 2019, professional website, glass office photos, client list that included 3 federal agencies and 2 other states, but nothing at the scale of the TBIS. The managing partner was Stuart Langford, 52 years old, a photo at a congressional event, an interview on a government technology podcast from 2023 where he talked about modernizing public systems. He had the right language, the right smile, the right connections, but nothing that showed he or his firm had ever actually built a system the size of what I built. I searched his partner, Kevin Draper, 46, management consulting background, no visible technical engineering history. Then I ran a simple search, Langford Draper Texas Contract 2025, and I found a note on a Texas state politics blog dated November 2025. Langford and Draper Consulting secures $4.2 million state contract for benefits software management, published 3 weeks after Dennis Crane told me the renewal was on track. I closed the laptop, picked up the yellow legal pad, and wrote the 3rd line. They knew before they told me. This was planned. 3 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Ethan Callum? Yes. My name is Claudia Osei. I'm an auditor with the Texas State Auditor's Office. A pause. I know you just lost your contract with DSH, and I need to ask you some questions, unofficially, for now. I was quiet for a second. Why unofficially? Because, she said carefully, we've been looking at this procurement process for 6 weeks, and there are things that don't add up. I picked up the yellow legal pad. Let me ask you something first, Claudia. Was the Langford and Draper contract posted to the official procurement portal? No, she said. It was not. The transition meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. Department of Human Services building, downtown Austin. Conference room on the 5th floor. I arrived at 10 sharp. Glass table. 6 people on their side. Just me on mine. Stuart Langford sat in the center. Blue shirt, no tie, the look of someone used to winning without working too hard for it. Firm handshake smile. Ethan, thank you for coming. This means a lot to us. I shook his hand. Didn't smile back. The meeting ran 3 hours. They asked technical questions about the system architecture, requested access to internal documentation, asked for integration manuals. I answered the minimum required, politely, without confrontation. But the entire time I was doing something nobody noticed. I was paying attention to the questions they asked, and the questions Stuart Langford asked. They were questions someone would only ask if they'd already seen the inside of the system. Not as a user. As someone who had access to the internal technical documentation. Documentation that belonged to Callum Systems LLC. Documentation I had never shared with anyone outside the department. I wrote in the yellow pad under the table while they talked above me. He already has the files. How? On Thursday night of that week, I received by email what they called a preliminary technical transition plan from Langford and Draper, a 46-page document describing how they plan to operate the TBIS over the next 2 years. It was a technical document full of specifications, server architecture, data flow, integration modules. I started reading. On page 12, there was a data flow diagram. I stopped, looked closer. My heart rate went up. That diagram. I knew every single line, every arrow, every connection node, because I drew that diagram in a grid notebook on a night in March 2019 at 2 a.m, alone at the kitchen table while Laura slept. It wasn't similar to mine. It wasn't inspired by mine. It was mine. With one difference. Where I had written eth_Callum_TBS_V4.3, they had written LND_TBIS_architecture_2025. They had erased my name and replaced it with theirs. I went straight to the terminal, opened the Callum Systems backup server, a private external server I'd been running for 11 years with every development file I'd ever created, opened the original file, timestamp, verification hash, my name in every line of metadata, March 2019. Then I opened their document. Page 31, Integration Module Code Section. There were comments in the code, technical notes that programmers leave inside the code to remind themselves what they're doing. And one of those comments read, in lowercase letters, Commandars EC_note. Verify this sync loop before next deploy. May cause latency on high load EC note. Ethan Callum note. My comment. From my code. Written by me. Years ago. They had copied my entire code base, with my personal notes still inside it. I closed the laptop, walked to the window and looked out at Austin for a long time. Then, very quietly, I went back to the yellow legal pad and wrote. They took everything and left their fingerprints inside the code. That was their mistake. I slept 3 hours that night, not because I was anxious, because I was thinking. When you find out that someone took 16 years of your work, there are 2 roads in front of you. The first one is emotional. You call everyone you know. You post on social media. You hire a lawyer in a panic. You send a furious email to Dennis Crane at 2 in the morning that you're going to regret by sunrise. The second road is different. It's colder, slower, harder, but it's the only one that works. My dad had a saying he repeated every time I wanted to react too fast to something. Ethan, a quick answer is a weak answer. Think before you talk. Move before you show your hand. I thought about that at 2 in the morning, lying on the ceiling. At 5 a.m., I got up, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, opened the yellow legal pad to a fresh page, and wrote at the top, what I have, what I need, what I can use. Under what I have, I wrote, the private backup server with every original TBIS file, every version, every update, every commit, with automatic timestamps going back to 2010, 16 years of signed contracts with the state of Texas, each one specifying that the intellectual property of the code I developed remained the property of Callum Systems LLC, licensed exclusively to the state for use, not for transfer, not for reassignment, for use. The data flow diagram with my name erased, and the original with my name intact, dated March 2019. The comment in the code. The EC note. 26 characters proving that no engineer at Langford and Draper had written that system, that someone had copied my entire file, with my voice still inside it, and Dennis Crane's emails, especially the one from September, 3 weeks before the contract was awarded to someone else, telling me the renewal was on track. Under what I need, I wrote just one thing: find out how they got access to my files. Because the code wasn't on a public cloud. It wasn't on the government system. It was on the Callum Systems internal server. Someone had provided those files to them, someone on the inside. Under what I can use, I wrote 3 letters. PIA, Texas Public Information Act. You've probably heard of the Freedom of Information Act, the federal law that gives every American citizen the right to request documents from the government. Every state has its own version. In Texas, it's the Public Information Act, and it has a detail that most people don't know about. When you file a formal request, the government agency has 10 business days to respond. If they want to deny the information, they have to request an opinion from the Texas Attorney General. And that process, the actual process of trying to block your request, gets recorded publicly. In other words, the more they try to hide, the more of a trail they leave. I spent that entire morning reading the law, line by line, section by section. By 2 in the afternoon, I knew exactly what to ask for. I opened the official request portal for the Texas Department of Human Services, and I filed my first request. I asked for every document related to the vendor selection process for the TBIS contract 2026 through 2027. Meeting minutes, internal emails, technical evaluations, any communication between department staff and representatives of Langford and Draper Consulting between January and December 2025. I hit submit. Then I opened a second window, filed a second request, this time to the Office of the State Comptroller, then a third, to the Office of the Attorney General, then a fourth. This wasn't one request. It was a net, cast at the same time, in every direction, and every single request was recorded in the public system, with my name, with the date, with the scope. Anyone could see I was asking questions. The next day, I got a message on LinkedIn. Ethan Callum, my name is Gil Moreno. I'm a reporter with the Austin Chronicle. I've been covering the TBIS procurement process for a few weeks. I saw your public information requests on the portal. Would you be open to a call? I stared at that message for a good while. I didn't know Gil Moreno, didn't know if he was trustworthy, didn't know what angle he was working. But one thing was clear. If a journalist was already watching this before I showed up, that meant I wasn't the only one who thought something was wrong. I replied, "You can call, but I'm listening only. I'm not talking yet." He called in 10 minutes. "Ethan, I've been covering government contracts in Texas for 6 years," he said, straight to it. No small talk. "This procurement has the fingerprints of something I've seen twice before. Directed contracts with fabricated technical justification built after the fact. But I've never had the technical side from the inside. Do you have it?" "I have it," I said. "But I'm not your source yet. I'm still building." "Understood," he said. "Just do me one thing. When you have enough, call me first." I hung up, wrote his name in the yellow legal pad, and next to it I wrote, "Allie," but on my timeline. 12 days after my first wave of requests, the responses started coming in, or rather, the non-responses. The Department of Human Services replied saying the requested documents were being reviewed for confidentiality and that they had submitted a query to the Attorney General requesting authorization to withhold part of the information. I read that, and for the first time in 2 weeks I smiled, because that meant they had something to hide, and that now, the Texas Attorney General's office was officially aware that these documents existed. I printed the response, put it in the folder, wrote in the yellow pad, "They asked to deny. That's evidence there's something to deny." But the comptroller's office was different. The comptroller responded in 7 days, with documents, financial records of the contract, values, projected payment dates, and buried on page 19 of a technical annex, the name of the internal evaluator who had recommended Langford and Draper for the contract, Dennis Crane, the same Dennis Crane who was my contract manager, the same one who told me the renewal was on track, the same one who hung up the phone when I asked him a question he didn't want to answer. Dennis wasn't just the messenger, he was part of it. Claudia Ose called me that evening. "I saw you're using the PIA," she said. No greeting. "Yes. They're going to try to block everything through the AG. You know that." "I know. But the blocking process itself is a trail." She went quiet for a second. "You thought of that yourself?" "I read the law," I said. Another pause. "Ethan, I need to tell you something. Officially, I can't help you. My investigation is internal and independent. But unofficially, I'll tell you this. There's a member of the Legislative Budget Oversight Committee who has been looking for a concrete case to anchor a hearing on IT contracts in state government. If you have documented evidence, that would be the right stage." "Who is it?" "Representative Frank Thibodeau, 17th District. Look him up." That night, Laura found me at the kitchen table at 11:30. She'd just come off a 12-hour shift, dark circles, hair still pulled back, still in her scrubs. She stood in the kitchen doorway looking at me for a couple seconds. "Ethan, how long are you going to do this?" "Do what?" "This. Alone. Not talking to anyone. Up at 5. In bed at midnight." I took a breath. "Laura, if I move too fast, if I talk to the wrong person at the wrong time, they bury everything before I get a chance to show what I have. I know what I've got. I just need to build it right." She looked at me for a long moment. "You know what keeps me up at night?" "What?" "Not the money, not the contract." She came and sat beside me. "It's thinking about Carla's students, who depend on that system to eat lunch at school. If that consulting firm doesn't know what they're doing with the code." She didn't finish the sentence. I looked at her, and something inside me went still and solid. I know, I said. That's why I'm not going to get this wrong. 3 weeks after the official transition, after Langford and Draper formally took over operations of the TBIS, the first failure report showed up on the department portal. Then the second, then the third. Within 2 weeks, there were 47 logged failure incidents in the benefits processing system. Families in El Paso who didn't receive food assistance on the right date. A public health clinic in San Antonio with the medical verification system down for 18 straight hours. 8 counties in East Texas with the housing assistance module completely inaccessible. I tracked every single one through the public portal, documenting, archiving each report. Then I got a text from my sister Carla. Ethan, the school lunch system has been broken for 3 days. The principal is losing her mind. Do you know anything about this? I closed my eyes for a moment. I thought about what she was describing. A school cafeteria, kids in line, a principal making phone calls, and I thought about what I had built. What I had spent 16 years making sure never broke down like this, sitting in the hands of people who had no idea how to run what they had stolen. I typed back, "I'm working on it." And I went to the yellow legal pad, documented every failure, date, time, affected module, estimated number of people impacted, because every failure was more evidence. Every failure proved they hadn't built that system. They had taken my code, and they didn't know what to do when something went wrong. It was on a Thursday afternoon that Stuart Langford called me directly. I wasn't expecting it. It wasn't the move I thought he'd make. "Ethan." The voice was calm, controlled. The kind of calm that people use when they're nervous but don't want to show it. "I heard you filed some formal information request related to the contracting process." "It's a public right," I said. "Of course it is." A pause. "I just wanted to call personally and say, I understand this transition has been difficult. Losing a long-term contract is hard, and if you have technical concerns about the transition, we're open to discussing them." "I appreciate that," I said, "but I don't have concerns about the transition. I have questions about how your team obtained access to Callum Systems' internal documentation before the contract was awarded." Silence. 3 full seconds. "I don't know what you're referring to," he said. The voice had changed, just slightly, but I heard it. "That's fine," I said. "Then it'll all be documented in my formal requests. Thanks for calling, Stuart." I hung up, stared at the phone, then wrote in the yellow legal pad, "He called. That means he's worried. People with nothing to hide don't call." 2 days later, I received an email from a Washington, D.C. law firm. Subject line, "Notice of potential defamation and tortious interference." The email said my formal information requests constituted potential malicious interference in the business operations of Langford and Draper Consulting, and that if I continued, they reserved the right to pursue legal action. I printed it, put it in the folder, wrote in the yellow pad, "They're scared. A legal threat before any actual proceedings means they know they can't win on the merits." Then I called Claudia Osei. "They sent me a threat letter," I said. "I know," she said. "My office got one too." We were both quiet for a second. "Claudia," I said, "I think it's time to talk to Representative Thibodeau." That night I sat at the kitchen table with the yellow legal pad open in front of me. I counted the pages I'd written since that first morning. 43 pages. Every request, every response, every system failure, every phone call, every email, every silence that should have been an answer. 43 pages of trail. They had the contract. They had the money. They had the lawyers. They had connections in Washington. But I had something they couldn't buy, erase, or litigate away. I had the truth, documented, time-stamped, with my name in every single line. And now, for the first time since that Tuesday morning, I knew exactly what to do with it. I spent 2 days thinking about how to respond to that letter from the Washington law firm. I knew what it was, a tactic, preventive intimidation. The kind of move that works on people who are afraid, people who back down, go quiet, and disappear without making too much noise. But I had read that letter 3 times. carefully. And there was something interesting about it. They hadn't mentioned the comments in the code. They hadn't mentioned the EC note. They hadn't mentioned the diagram from March 2019. They knew I had filed public information requests. They knew I was asking questions. But they didn't know, or were pretending not to know, exactly what I had found inside the technical document they had sent me themselves. And that told me something important. Stuart Langford didn't know what his own engineers had handed over in that document. He was afraid of what I might have, not what I actually had. I sat down, opened the laptop, and wrote my response to the letter. 2 paragraphs, no lawyer, no anger, just facts. Paragraph 1. I was exercising my legal right of access to public information as guaranteed by the Texas Public Information Act, Chapter 552 of the Government Code. Paragraph 2. If Langford and Draper believed my requests were unlawful, I encouraged them to present that argument formally to the Texas Attorney General, whose office was already aware of my requests. I hit send and wrote in the yellow legal pad, "Returned the ball," to their court, with the law in my hands. Representative Frank Thibodeau's office was in a commercial building 8 blocks from the state capitol in downtown Austin. I arrived 10 minutes early, sat in the waiting area with my folder, documents printed, organized by date, with color-coded tabs that Laura had helped me put together the night before. Frank Thibodeau was 61 years old, silver hair, wide shoulders, the kind of man you picture having grown up on a ranch somewhere in West Texas. Firm handshake, direct eye contact. "Ethan Callum," he said, walking me into his office. "Claudia Osei told me you have something worth my time. She doesn't say that about many people." "I hope not to waste it," I said. We sat down. He crossed his arms. "Show me." I spent 45 minutes walking him through everything. No drama, no emotional appeals, just the facts, in order, with the documentation to back every single one. The original contract and the intellectual property clause. The timestamp on the original file from March 2019. The diagram with my name erased and their name in its place. The EC note comment in the code they had sent me. The system failure logs after the transition. All 47 failures. The families affected. The counties without access. And the threat letter. Thibodeau didn't speak once during the entire presentation. He looked at every document I placed on the desk. When I finished, he was quiet for about 20 seconds. "You built that system by yourself?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "For 16 years?" "Yes, sir." "And they took your code, put their name on it, and billed the Texas taxpayer $4.2 million for it?" "That's what the evidence shows." He stood up, walked to the window, stood with his back to me for about 10 seconds. When he turned around, he said something I wasn't expecting. "Ethan, I've been trying to get a hearing on irregularities in state IT contracts for 18 months. Every time I get close, someone on the committee shuts it down. Because the people involved have friends in the right places." He looked at the folder in my hand. "But now I have something concrete. With names. With dates. With technical evidence that any person in that room can understand." "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Formal testimony. Public hearing of the Budget Oversight Committee. Broadcast live." He paused. "You up for that?" I thought about Laura. I thought about Carla. I thought about those 47 failure reports. I thought about the families in El Paso, the clinic in San Antonio, the kids in the lunch line. "Yes, sir," I said. "I'm up for it." I drove home that afternoon and did something I hadn't done in weeks. I stopped, sat on the couch in the living room. No laptop, no yellow legal pad, no screen of any kind. And I just thought, because sitting alone at a kitchen table before sunrise, building a case document by document, that's one thing. That's my world. Logic, structure, problems with solutions. But sitting in a public legislative hearing, on camera, with lawyers on the other side, and politicians who might want to use you or bury you depending on which way the wind is blowing that day, that's something I had never done. I'm an engineer. I'm most at home behind a terminal, inside a server, solving a problem that has a logical answer. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a politician. I don't know how to play that game. And then a thought came to me that I wasn't ready for. What if they destroy me before I get there? They had attorneys. They had public relations people. They had relationships on committees. Stuart Langford had been photographed at congressional events next to people who made decisions about state budgets. I had a yellow legal pad and 43 pages. I got up, went to the kitchen, made coffee, and called my sister Carla. "Ethan," she answered, bright. "Haven't heard from you in weeks. Everything okay?" "Everything's okay." "Carla, is the school lunch system working again?" It came back, but it was down for 3 days. You know what that means? The principal had to call every single family individually. A pause. "Do you know what happened?" "I'm finding out," I said. "Carla, do you trust me?" "Since always." "Why?" "Because I'm going to need you to trust me for a little while longer." I called Gil Moreno the next morning. "Ethan," he said. "Finally." "I'm ready to talk," I said, "but with conditions." "What conditions?" "You don't publish anything before the hearing. You verify every fact with me before it goes to print, and you don't reveal my strategy. Only the documented facts." "Agreed," he said, without hesitating. "But I need to tell you something first. I've been running my own PIA requests, and I found something you may not have yet." My pulse picked up slightly. "What?" "Dennis Crane resigned from DSH 10 days ago, quietly. No announcement, he's just gone." I was silent for a moment. "Is that public record?" "The resignation is, the reason isn't, but the timing." He let it hang there. I wrote in the yellow legal pad, "Dennis is gone. Either he ran, or they moved him out of the picture. Either way, he's scared." It was on a Monday morning, 18 days before the scheduled hearing, that the system went down hard. Not a partial failure, a cascading failure. 7 modules simultaneously. 14 counties affected. Over 200,000 people without access to their benefits for 36 straight hours. The department portal logged 116 support requests in under 12 hours. I tracked every single one in real time, documenting, filing every report. At 8 that morning, I got a text from Laura. She was at the hospital on shift. "Ethan, I have a patient here in the ER. Elderly woman came by bus. No active medical coverage because the system froze her automatic renewal. She's been here 4 hours waiting for it to get resolved. I'm mid-shift. I can't help her. Do you know what's happening?" I read that message 3 times. An elderly woman. In an emergency room. 4 hours. Because the system I had built, the system I had spent 16 years making sure would never fail like this, was in the hands of people who didn't know how to run what they had stolen. I put the phone down, went to the bathroom, stood with both hands on the sink for about 30 seconds. Then I walked back to the table, opened the yellow legal pad, and wrote, pressing harder than necessary, "This has to end, and it will." With 2 weeks to go before the hearing, I went into the mode I know best. Work. I spent 6 days organizing every piece of documentation into chronological order. Every PIA request, every response, every denial with its corresponding justification. The trail of AG blocks, the system failure logs, the original files with timestamps from the private server, the original diagram versus theirs, the code with the EC note. And then I did something nobody expected from me. I hired an independent technical expert, not a lawyer, a software engineer, senior faculty at the University of Texas at Austin, a specialist in software intellectual property, with no connection to state government. His name was Dr. Aaron Fielding. I spent a full day with him, showed him both files side by side, showed him the metadata, showed him the comments, showed him the commit history from the server. He spent 2 hours examining everything in silence. Then he turned to me and said, "Ethan, from a purely technical standpoint, This isn't derived from your work. This is your work, with a find and replace on the name in the file headers, and a few lines of superficial code added on top to make it look like someone had touched it. He paused. It's like taking an entire book, changing the name on the cover, adding a 2-page preface, and claiming you wrote the book. Would you put that in writing? Without hesitation, he said. I wrote in the yellow legal pad, in larger letters than usual. I have an expert. I have the hearing. I have the press. One thing left. It was Thursday of the week before the hearing that Claudia Osei called me at 7:30 in the morning. Her voice was different, more direct, more careful. Ethan, can we meet in person? We met at a coffee shop in downtown Austin. She arrived with a thin folder under her arm and a coffee she never touched. My internal investigation has concluded, she said. No small talk. I can't show you the full report or it's being submitted to the AG before the hearing, but I can tell you this. She opened the folder, showed me one page, didn't let me photograph it, but she let me read it. It was an account statement, with dates, with amounts. Between March and September of 2025, Dennis Crane had received 9 transfers from a consulting company registered in Delaware. No operational history, no website, no registered employees. The name of the company was Draper Advisory Group, LLC. Draper, the same last name as the partner of Langford and Draper Consulting. 9 payments, each one structured just below the automatic IRS reporting threshold, totaling $72,000. I stared at that page for a long time. Dennis Crane was paid, I said, not a question. To ensure the internal evaluation process resulted in the award going to Langford and Draper, she confirmed, and to ensure the current contractor was not notified of the process until the decision was already finalized. I closed my eyes for just a second. 16 years. Exceptional performance reviews. Perfect on-time delivery. A system that ran without a single major failure. And they had simply bought the person who signed the paperwork. Claudia, I said, are you going to be at the hearing? I'm testifying before you, she said. That's why I came to tell you. I didn't want you walking in there without knowing. She picked up her coffee, took the first sip, and before she stood up, she said one more thing. Ethan, what you did, with a legal pad and the public records law, no attorney, no lobbying budget, no political connections. She paused. That's the kind of thing the system was designed to make impossible. You did it anyway. A beat. Make sure that's in the record. The night before the hearing was strange. Laura made dinner. We ate together, for the first time in weeks, without a laptop, without the yellow legal pad, without any talk about the case. She asked me about the night we met, some story about a party in a tiny apartment in Austin in 2004, where I spent the whole evening explaining batch data processing to her while everyone else was dancing around us. You were the most boring and the most fascinating man I had ever met at the same time, she said, laughing. I laughed too. After dinner, I went to the living room, picked up the yellow legal pad, turned through every page, 61 now. 61 pages of questions, answers, trails, evidence, names, dates, failures, phone calls. I put the pad in the folder, along with the printed documents, Dr. Fielding's report, the failure logs, the server timestamps, closed the folder. And I thought about something my dad said once, when I was a kid. I'd lost a science competition to a boy who had copied the project from his older brother. Ethan, the problem with stealing someone's work is that you never learn to do it yourself. And one day, everyone can see the difference. I had waited for that day for 4 months. Tomorrow, it was here. On the morning of the hearing, I woke up at 5. Not from anxiety. For the first time in 4 months, I woke up with clarity. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, looked out the window. Austin was waking up slowly, lights coming on in buildings across the way, the sky still purple at the edges. I picked up my phone. There was a message from Carla, sent at 11 the night before. Ethan, I saw that you're testifying at a hearing today about the benefit system. I didn't know you were the one who built that, all this time. Why did you never tell me? I looked at that message for a while. Then I typed back. Because doing the right work never needed an audience, but today it does. Watch if you can. I put the phone in my pocket, picked up the folder, and walked out the front door toward the Texas State Capitol. The Texas State Capitol is a building designed to make you feel small. Pink granite, columns that rise 4 stories, marble corridors where every single footstep echoes back at you. It's a place built to remind you that power has an address, and that most people don't live there. I arrived at 8:20 in the morning. The hearing started at 10. I went through security, found the right corridor, room 2E14, Budget Oversight Committee, dark wooden door with a brass nameplate. I sat on a bench in the hallway and stayed quiet for about 10 minutes. I watched people arrive, staffers with folders, journalists with recorders, 2 men in suits I didn't recognize, but who had the walk of people paid to be in rooms where decisions get made. And then, at the far end of the corridor, I saw Stuart Langford. He had 3 people with him, 2 lawyers by the look of it, and a woman who carried herself like a public relations handler. He was wearing a dark charcoal suit, hair perfect, that smile I had seen in the photo from the congressional event. He saw me. For 1 second, our eyes met across that marble hallway. He didn't look away. I didn't either. Then he turned back to one of his lawyers and kept talking, like I wasn't there. I opened the yellow legal pad to a blank page, wrote the date, and underneath it, 1 single word: today. Gil Moreno found me 10 minutes before the session opened. Recorder in his jacket pocket, notebook in hand, that energy of a journalist who knows he's on the right story. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Ready," I said. "Langford brought 2 attorneys and a lobbyist," he told me. "The lobbyist has a relationship with 2 members of the committee. You think they'll try to block?" "They'll try to delay, file procedural objections, question technical relevance. It's the standard playbook when you can't win on the merits." He paused. "But Thibodeau controls the agenda. They can't get you out of that room." Claudia Osei arrived right after. Professional folder, composed expression. She gave me a quiet nod. "I testify first," she reminded me. "You're third, after me and Dr. Fielding." "Understood." She leaned in slightly and spoke low. "Ethan, the auditor's report was submitted to the AG this morning. They already know Dennis Crane is under criminal investigation." A pause. "That's going to come out in the hearing." I took a slow breath. Criminally. I thought about the Dennis who had told me in September that everything was on track. The Dennis who had hung up the phone when I asked him a simple question. The Dennis who had sold 16 years of my work and the basic dignity of 2.3 million people for $72,000. "Thank you, Claudia," I said. Room 2E. 14 had capacity for about 80 people. It was nearly full. The committee bench at the front, 7 legislators with Thibodeau at the center, the witness table to the left, an audience of journalists, staffers, and citizens who had shown up on their own. A broadcast camera on a tripod at the back of the room. Texas Legislature Online, the public broadcast channel of the State Assembly. Thibodeau opened the session at 10:02. "This hearing of the Budget Oversight Committee concerns the review of the procurement process for the TBIS contract 2026 through 2027, valued at $4.2 million, conducted by the Texas Department of Human Services." He looked directly into the camera. "This session is open to the public and is being broadcast live. All testimony becomes part of the official record of the state of Texas." One of Langford's attorneys raised his hand immediately. Procedural objection. He argued that the procurement process had followed the department's internal protocols. Thibodeau listened, paused 2 seconds. Objection noted and overruled. We proceed. Claudia testified for 22 minutes. Steady voice, technical language. No drama, just facts. The TBIS procurement had not been posted to the official state solicitation portal as required by law. The internal justification used to waive the public posting requirement, listed as operational technical urgency, had not been documented within the minimum lead time required by state regulation. The internal evaluator who recommended Langford and Draper, Dennis Crane, had received payments from a company linked to the firm's partner in the 12 months prior to the award. Total amount, $72,000, structured across 9 transfers, each one below the automatic IRS reporting threshold. When she finished, the room was completely silent. One of the committee members, a woman I didn't recognize, asked, "Does that constitute bribery of a public official?" "That determination belongs to the district attorney," Claudia answered carefully. "What I can state is that the structure of those payments is consistent with the pattern identified in previous cases of public contract corruption in this state." Langford's attorney tried another objection. Thibodeau cut him off before he finished the sentence. Dr. Aaron Fielding testified for 31 minutes. He brought a laptop. The 2 files, side by side, projected on a screen on the wall of the hearing room, the original from Callum Systems, the document from Langford and Draper. He did what engineers do best. He showed the evidence without decoration, file metadata, verification hash, timestamps, the commit history from the Callum Systems private server. Then he zoomed in on the comment inside the code. Irisi_note. Verify this sync loop before next deploy. May cause latency on high load. This comment, Dr. Fielding said to the committee, was written by the original author of the code as a personal development note. It uses the author's initials, EC, followed by a specific technical instruction. This comment is present in the original Callum Systems file, dated 2021, and it is present, unchanged, in the technical document delivered by Langford and Draper Consulting to the Texas Department of Human Services in December 2025. He paused. It is not possible for 2 independent programmers working separately to produce the same personal comment with the same initials, the same phrasing, and the same specific technical context. Thibodeau leaned forward. "Doctor, in plain language, are you telling this committee that Langford and Draper delivered to the state of Texas software they did not write?" "Yes, sir. That is exactly what I am saying, with a degree of technical certainty I would characterize as absolute." In the audience, I heard someone, I couldn't tell who, make a low sound. Not surprise. Confirmation. The kind of sound people make when something they already suspected is finally said out loud in an official place for the record. It was at that moment that Stuart Langford requested the floor. Thibodeau granted it, with visible caution. Langford stood up. Composed. Controlled voice. "Representative Thibodeau, with all due respect to this committee, what is being presented here is a technical interpretation of files that may have shared origins. It is common practice in software development for code bases to be reused, adapted, and built upon from prior work under implied usage agreements. Mr. Callum was contracted by the state of Texas. Code produced under a government contract has—" "The contract," I said. The room turned. I hadn't spoken yet. It wasn't my turn. But I said it quietly, without raising my voice, and Thibodeau looked at me and gave a slight nod. "Mr. Callum," he said, "you may speak." I stood up. The contract signed between Callum Systems LLC and the Texas Department of Human Services, across all 6 renewals over 16 years, states explicitly, in Clause 7.2, that the intellectual property of the code developed remains the property of Callum Systems LLC, licensed exclusively to the state for use, not for transfer, not for reassignment, for use only. I took the document from the folder and placed it on the committee bench. The state never acquired the right to transfer that code to a third party, and Callum Systems certainly never authorized anyone to do so, because no one asked Callum Systems, because we were never informed of the process, because Dennis Crane was paid to make sure we never found out. Silence. Complete silence in that room. Langford remained standing for another 2 seconds. Then he sat down. His attorney leaned in and whispered something. Langford didn't respond. He stared straight ahead, that polished composure beginning to show the first crack, the look of a man calculating how much time he has left before everything collapses around him. I sat down in the witness chair. Thibodeau said, "Mr. Callum, the committee is ready for your full testimony." I took a breath, looked down at the yellow legal pad in front of me, and I began. Not with the code, not with the technical evidence. I began at the actual beginning. My father worked 32 years in a factory in San Antonio. He never complained about a single day of work. He taught me to use a computer on a terminal that wasn't ours, because we didn't have one at home. And he taught me that if you do the right work, the right way, the right thing happens in the end. The room was quiet. I took that seriously. I spent 16 years building a system that today processes benefits for 2.3 million Texans. Food assistance, medical coverage, housing support. It wasn't glamorous, it didn't make headlines. But when it worked, and it always worked, a child got lunch at school. An elderly woman had her medical coverage renewed on time. A family didn't fall through the cracks on a Friday night. I paused. When I received the email telling me my contract had been replaced, my first reaction wasn't anger. It was confusion. Because I hadn't heard about any procurement process. Because in September my contract manager had told me the renewal was on track. Because in 16 years I had never received a single formal complaint about my work. So I started asking questions. Simple questions. With the public records law in my hands. And the more I asked, the clearer it became that someone had deliberately cut me out of that process. Not because my work was inadequate, but because my work was too good to replace legitimately. So they decided it was easier to take it. I looked at the committee, at Thibodeau. I don't have an army of attorneys, I don't have a lobbyist, I didn't attend congressional events. I'm a man who built a small company at a kitchen table in Austin, Texas. And what I learned over these past 4 months is that the public transparency system in this state, when used correctly, is more powerful than any law firm in Washington, D.C. I paused, and that sometimes, the only thing standing between justice and impunity is one person who refuses to stop asking questions. The hearing ran 4 hours and 20 minutes in total. At the close, Thibodeau announced that the committee would formally refer to the Texas Attorney General a recommendation for criminal investigation into the TBIS procurement process, focusing on the payments to Dennis Crane and the potential violation of the Callum Systems Intellectual Property Clause. The Langford and Draper contract was suspended pending independent audit. The Department of Human Services was directed to restore emergency operations of the TBIS under independent technical supervision. Stuart Langford walked out of the room without making a statement. Both attorneys went with him. The public relations handler stayed behind trying to talk to journalists. Nobody stopped to listen. Gil Moreno found me in the hallway. "Ethan, how do you feel?" I thought about it for a moment. "Tired," I said. "But good. You know this is going to be front page tomorrow." "I know. And that there are going to be months of legal proceedings, investigations, depositions ahead." "I know." He looked at me. "Was it worth it?" I thought about Carla's message, about the elderly woman in the emergency room, about 116 support requests filed in a single morning. "It was always worth it," I said. I called my sister on the walk back to the parking lot. She picked up on the second ring. "Ethan," her voice was softer than usual. I watched, all of it. I was quiet for a second. "And? Why did you never tell me it was you, all this time?" "Carla, 16 years, Ethan. I used that system every single week. My students depended on it, and I didn't know it was my brother who built the whole thing." I felt something in my chest. I'm not sure exactly what to call it. It wasn't pride. It was something quieter than that. "Dad would have been proud," she said. I kept walking. Didn't say anything for a moment. "I know," I said finally. "I know." I got home at 4:30 in the afternoon. Laura was in the kitchen. She had made coffee. 2 slices of banana bread on a plate on the table. The same banana bread she made every time something significant happened in our lives. Our first apartment, the day I opened Callum Systems, the day I signed the first contract with the state. She didn't ask anything. She just looked at me. I sat down, picked up the mug, took the first sip in silence. Then I placed the yellow legal pad in the center of the table, opened it to the last written page, and I wrote the final line. Not about Langford, not about Dennis Crane, not about the contract or the code or the hearing or the attorneys. It was a line my father would have understood immediately. The right work, done the right way. The right thing happened in the end. I closed the pad, and for the first time in 4 months, I went to bed before midnight. 3 months later, Dennis Crane was indicted by the Texas District Attorney on charges of public official corruption and violation of state procurement law. Stuart Langford and Draper Consulting were named in a civil suit filed by the state of Texas for intellectual property infringement and unjust enrichment using public funds. The case is ongoing. The TBIS contract was returned to Callum Systems LLC with a 4-year addendum and revised terms that Callum Systems could never have negotiated under normal circumstances. Gil Moreno published a 4-part investigative series in the Austin Chronicle on irregularities in state IT contracting. The series was nominated for the Texas Press Association Award. And on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after that first Tuesday, I woke up at 6, sat in the same chair, at the same table, with the same coffee. I opened the laptop. There were 3 new emails from procurement offices in 2 other states asking whether Callum Systems would be interested in expanding the TBIS platform beyond Texas. I picked up a new notebook, blue this time, and opened it to a blank page, wrote at the top, "What's next?" and I got to work.